What? Hello and welcome back. And that's right, today I want to talk about a bloody big NAS. This is the OPN or OpnNAS 12. Now it's arriving in 4 different configurations across 2 different profiles, and that is the R12 and R12 Pro and the D12 and D12 Pro. And it's going to be arriving on crowdfunding very, very soon. Perhaps it's already live at the time of your watching this. And in this video, I'm hoping to help you decide whether it deserves your data, because let's be honest, there aren't many NAS devices this kind of scale in the old DIY market, unless you go down the road of getting yourself a Johnsbow N5, and more on that later on, or going for a rack mount solution. This kind of desktop profile device is massive. Before we go any further though, let's clear up this table a bit, shall we? Now, the device was sent to me from a chap called Eric over at OpnNAS there, and the rest of the team were looking to see if there is a gap in the market for something like this, hence why they've gone for the crowdfunding route there. Now, they are based in Canada, but the construction of this device is something we'll talk about later on, particularly now at the moment, at the start of 2025, when I think it would be fair to say that a lot of Americans are thinking long and hard about import and export at the moment. Now, it was sent through with a full retail package. There was the enormous box that you saw earlier on. It arrived with the retail kit there with power cables, cable ties, screws for 2.5-inch and 3.5-inch media there, cable ties, further cables for PCIe. It also arrived with additional cables for the internal PSU, and it arrived with a bag of crisps. And I'm going to tell you right now, other NAS brands watching this right now, if you think you can bribe me just by including crisps in your retail package, you are bang on the money. That is how you get it done. But jokes aside, we've got to get out of the way early doors. This has to be part 1 of a 2-part video series. Putting something like this through its paces, and you'll find out later on why when we find out more about the expandability of this device and its storage capabilities, is going to take time for me to source the kind of media and PCIe that I'm going to need for this video. So in this video, I'm going to discuss at length about the hardware, and depending on when I get the drive media arrived, I might include some of the tests later on in this video. If they're not in this, they'll all be in part 2 in the series. But for today, I want to talk about the hardware on this, the value for money of the hardware, the origin of the hardware inside this, and very early doors, before this makes it to public crowdfunding to a full extent, whether you should consider this, and particularly versus that of DIY. As mentioned earlier on, although this video is more of a hardware overview of just what the D12 and R12 systems can provide, I am working on, in collaboration with the brand themselves, a larger scale series of tests on what this system can do in terms of 10 GBE, 40 GBE, 100 GBE, Plex server transcoding. We're going to be looking at individual Samba connections as well. And then on top of that, we are going to be digging into a little bit about what the individual U.2 drives are capable of within different Windows environments. So we are working on that. I just wanted to get this hardware video out, but this is just a quick preview here just to let you know that that is incoming. Now, in the many email exchanges I've had with Eric over at OpnNAS on this, one of my earliest questions about this device was, why are they going to sell it pre-built? This device, this massive 12-bay enclosure, which by the way has PCBs inside there for the backplane that support not only SATA but also supporting U.2 and U.3, is actually something of a unique beast. But they've made it clear that out of the gate, they want to market this device and put it on crowdfunding as a pre-built solution, not just the enclosure. Now, if you look on your Alibabas and the AliExpress, there are actually several very similar cases to this. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later on as to why that probably is. But at least for now, what do you get if you get the pre-made solution? Now, this is the D12 Pro version. Again, the R12 has got a horizontal drive placement there. And again, the Pro series devices are the ones that got a little bit more hardware inside, but also the broader scope of support of U.2 and U.3. So if you're looking at this device and you're not going to be utilizing NVMe U.2 or U.3 profile drives inside, you're not going to need to go for the Pro Series model. The standard class model in both the R and the D has pretty much dedicated SATA. Where that differs is at the backplane. Where these 12 drives are, these are broken down into 3 individual 4-port backplanes. And the Pro Series device, those backplanes not only arrive with SFF outputs, which support 4 SATAs each, but also an additional SFF 8654 connection, 2 of them on each board, which allows for that U.2, U.3 additional bandwidth there. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. The CPU on this, which is going to be tremendously important, is a pretty impressive little beast. It's one of the few that I've talked about here on the channel in a ready-built solution that not only has integrated graphics, but also has ECC support. Those two things you generally don't find in the same CPU category unless you go high-end AMD. Now, this is an Intel-based CPU. It is a 13th generation i5. It is the i5-13500. It's a 14-core processor at 6 power cores and 8 efficiency cores and 20 threads to play with. That CPU can go from 1.8 gigahertz up to 4.8 when needed. The TDP is pretty aggressive at 65 watts, scaling up to 154 watts, and it has integrated graphics at 1.55 gigahertz when bursted. Now, that is a hefty TDP, but this is not your common garden average NAS solution. This is something that's going to be running and gunning high-end for virtualization, Perplex Media Server for high-end raw video editing, and that CPU is what you're kind of going to need for that kind of throughput for this kind of drive media, but also to get the job done. And also the lane allocation is what you're going to need more than anything when you are bifurcating like an absolute mofo to spread out the distribution on this for storage media and the PCIe's, something again we'll talk about later. Now, the memory, as mentioned, is ECC. It has 4 UDIMM memory slots there inside, and it supports up to a eye-watering 192 gigabytes of ECC memory there. Again, that is utilizing the 13th generation CPU. So if this ever rolls out with no CPU or earlier generations in the 12th gen, then it will max out about 128 gig. Now, this is made possible due to the chipset. It's a W680 chipset inside there across that massive motherboard. Now, we'll talk about it more during the DIY section, but you don't find many MOBOs in DIY NAS solutions like this one in terms of that scale out. In terms of PCIe, for example, this system has 7 PCIe slots inside. Now, some of them are occupied with PCIe cards because of that tremendous amount of storage requiring dedicated storage cards inside there. But in total, each of the individual PCIe slots are 2 slots at Gen 5 times 8, although they are times 16 physical slots there. They've obviously brought that down to spread things out. There's 2 Gen 4 times 4 slots. There's 2 Gen 3 times 4 slots, and there's a standard 32-bit PCIe there. Now, again, as mentioned, some of those slots are occupied. And the storage bays, as mentioned, on the non-Pro version are all SATA across all of the available bays there. But when you go for the Pro series model there, because it has different backplane options there at the back, depending on whether you go for the R or the D version there, you'll have 4 SATA standard, and the other 8 bays there can be adjusted towards SATA U.2, U.3, and then again that's feeding into those tri-direction backplanes, the PCBs that are servicing 4 drives each. And internally, there are 2 M.2 NVMe slots at Gen 4, and there's even an M2 key in there, which I'm sure you can utilize an adapter on. No one's going to use Wi-Fi on this unless you want some low-end failover. Now, regardless of whether you go for the Pro Series model or not, that is a bonkers amount of storage, notwithstanding cooling and ventilation, something we'll talk about in a bit. How much opportunity do you have to really enjoy a lot of that storage media? So if we turn the device around, on the back we find a plethora of connectivity there. Now, one of the things that really surprised me was the system arrives with only one 10GBE port. Now, I get it, you want to keep it cost effective, you don't quite know what people are going to have, whether they're going to have greater than 10 gig network switches, but nonetheless, arriving with a single 10G drive in there, and that's an AQC113C 10G upgrade card inside there, that is still not going to be anywhere near enough for this amount of storage. There's a couple of 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports there on the original backplane of the W680 board, chipset board, but still nonetheless, I'm surprised they didn't scale out with perhaps a 2-port 10GBE, maybe even a 25 gig card option. Maybe that's something that will be added as a you know, one of the incentives during the crowdfunding there. But what about these other two PCIe cards here? Well, one of them is a SATA board there, and on that SATA board you have got on board an ASM1166 SATA controller running on a Gen 3 ×2 lane there, and that's got 4 SATA ports connected. There's also 4 more additional ports funneled into the original motherboard there inside. And again, that is where you're going to have that choice of what you want to do with the individual 12 bays. They're all going to populate 2.5 inch or 3.5 inch media, but at least on the Pro Series device, you have got the PCBs already inside that allow you to connect the different kinds of drive media you want. So maybe you don't want to take advantage of U.2 or U.3 on day one, but you can still take advantage of SATA now with the option to scale up later with the cables and more internally. Now, those U.2, U.3 supported ports there are made possible thanks to not only a controller card inside that retails for about $200 to $300, again, more on that later on, but also thanks to cables like this one. These are 8654 SFF cables there, and these funnel from that backplane into the PCIe card I've just mentioned. Now, coming soon on the channel, we're going to be talking a lot more about the opportunities that cable that's becoming a lot more widely used in worlds of DIY NAS is allowing users to do. Some of these are actually PCIe ×6 speed. So you could have cards like these at Gen 3 or Gen 4 performance levels that, rather than being limited to ×4 speed cables, open the door to ×6. It's kind of weird, and we have a dedicated video on that soon. But the point I'm making is that it has made applications towards much faster drive media a great deal more accessible and actually brought down the affordability there. That's why this 12-bay system, that in most cases upwards of a year and a half ago would have been dedicated SATA or maybe dedicated SATA SAS, has got that flexibility there. Now, if we touch on some of the more domestic level connections, we've got 10 USB 3 ports there. We've got USB-C on the front there, and on the back we've even got a DisplayPort. We've got a couple of DisplayPorts, and we've got an HDMI out there. Again, thanks to it being integrated graphics. The PCIe card slots, it's really up to you what you want to choose. This was the default configuration the system arrived with. But now I think we have to talk about the thorny subject of cooling, because this device is a metal chassis all the way around for a little bit of dissipation there of heat. On top of that, it has 7 active cooling fans. We have 3 here on the base on the rear. We have an additional one up here. We're not including the PSU fan. And on the front, there's a mesh panel that has 3 more fans. Now that scales up to 9 fans on the R12 model, Pro and non-Pro. And they are all silent fans, I've been informed, and although I have had it running in the studio and it's been low noise, that has not been with full U.2 population, and therefore any measurements I could make right now before I've got drive media in the studio, I don't think would be very representative of the system during a heavy load. I will say during idle, it was fine, but because I don't have it fully kitted out with those drives, I'm not prepared to share the results of the audio levels. Now, depending on whether you go for the R or D version or the Pro or the non-Pro, regardless, it arrives with a 450 watt PSU, but the Pro Series one arrives with an SFX PSU, presumably because of space requirements there. But there's also additional cabling included for those that want to install higher end graphics card and need that additional power. But 450 watts on this is a decent level of power to start supplying to the expandability of this device. Now, we've got to talk about it, the old elephant in the room, the price tag. This is not cheap, regardless of the fact it's going to crowdfunding there, and they have done a price drop there for early backers. It's worth highlighting that the S12 non-Pro, starting at the price tag of $1,650, ends up tapping out when you go for the D12 Pro model at $2,150, $2,150 there. Now, a lot of you are going to be thinking, why on earth would I spend that kind of wonga on a pre-made solution? I could probably get something like a Johnsbow N5 case, which is also a 12-bay device, which allows for a lot of PCIe slots. There also allows for a few custom backplanes if you're prepared to buy them. Why would I buy something pre-built and pay over the odds? And I think that is a perfectly valid question. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to head on to my laptop now and do some shopping. Now, breaking down that price tag in terms of DIY, I will say right now, the margins aren't huge. Now, to put that into perspective, there is that 1,650 2050 there for the R12, so going up to 2050 for the Pro model, and as you can see for the D model there, D12D Pro, 1650 and 2180. We've got the hardware architecture there if we go into the specifications, and that's really what we're aiming for here in terms of building it for ourselves. So number one, we can see there's our CPU, the exact same CPU. We're not going to be changing any of the processors inside. We're sticking with whatever is included. The same goes, we're going in for a cooler. It's very similar to the cooler that's already inside this device, and we're adding these to the basket as we go. We've got a SATA card there. That's if you want to place it inside, and it's taking advantage of the two SFF8087 adapter connections that both go into individual cable connectors. We've got a 12-bay case here. This is a John's bow. I did consider looking at a fractal node, but I thought we're going to go for the 12 bays of storage and the extra space. Plus, we have to accommodate all the additional fans. So moving forward, I went ahead and went for the John's bow in the basket. Then, in terms of a PSU, I went for this one here, the AGV, because it allows us to use modified cables that we want to use, and we need to make sure we've got the ability to scale out those cables later. Moreover, from that, when it came to the motherboard, we are restricting ourselves to a W680 motherboard. I didn't go for this one, notwithstanding the fact that it's very expensive. It's ex-server grade, and these ones are generally quite odd to install. So I went ahead for a standard Asus one here, the Pro WS, and this would allow us to have not only those Gen 5 and Gen 4 PCIe slots, but also the M.2s as well, and also the support of ECC and those available slots there on the side. Talking ECC, by the way, I went ahead and got 32 gig of ECC memory. That's two 16 gig modules there to put inside UDIM ECC. And moving forward from that, the SATA cable is going directly into the motherboard, and the real bugger was trying to get the card for those U.2s. There are different options in the market, but there aren't many on Amazon. So for example, this one here knocks out for about $220. There are cheaper ones in the market. It wasn't even listed on different regions of Amazon. But I was able to get the card as low as $166, but a lot of these had kind of bulk purchase limitations as well. So I'm averaging it out of these cards at around 200 Nika or so. And alternatively, you can, instead of trying to get the PCB kind of backplanes, you could buy something from something like ICDock that will allow you to install cages and caddies that would support U.2 and U.3 drives. But of course, getting those to fit inside the John's bow case is going to be a different matter entirely. But just for the sake of argument, I just went ahead and kind of vaguely put these on here as options, although we can't really price up those PCB boards there. And finally, we needed cables for those U.2s, whether it is we're running them into backplanes or we're running them into the ICDocks. Regardless, we're going to need those cables. So looking at the tally, we got a tally here of $1,124 there. Again, it did vary when I did an earlier appraisal of this, and this has still got quite a lot of gaps. For example, it doesn't include thermal paste. It doesn't include the PCB backplanes that we mentioned before, because we may have to go to somewhere like CWWK if we wanted to build this, and they generally retail for about 20 to 30 quid basically, or if you want those triplane ones, then you're looking closer to 80 or 90 there. And remember, none of this includes the card either, which I'm going to say is around $200, averaging between the different options that I found in the market there. So if we're generous and just add $200 to this price tag here, that means this is going to be coming in at $1,324, and maybe let's call it $50 for thermal paste, screws, additional cables, anything we've missed in between. So we're looking at between $1,350 and $1,400 there to recreate, at least very vaguely and definitely not consistently, the D12 Pro. And the D12 Pro that they're selling at $2,180. There's still 500 Nika or so's difference. So that $1,120 spend there, keep in mind that's not including delivery, not including tax, didn't include any of the little extra things like the cable ties, like the cables, like thermal paste. It also didn't include that 2 to 250 Nika PCIe card for managing U.2 and U.3 and NVMe drives. You would have had to add another $200 at least. On top of that, you're going to have to include, let's say, $50 for any of the little middling things in between. Individual power cables, maybe Molex adapters there. And again, I still didn't even include PCB adapters there. As mentioned, you could have gone down the road of getting hold of some of those ICDock adapters to populate some of the bays within the John's bow, or an empty DIY case of choice. or you would end up having to buy some of those adapter boards, like I mentioned before, from brands like CWWK that feed out into that SFS 8654 adapter port. The point I'm making is, I reckon you are looking at a spend of about 1,350 to 1,400 nicker baseline for all of the individual components if you wanted to buy them over the counter. You could probably make some savings on AliExpress or Alibaba, and of course that would impact the delivery time there, but maybe you'd make a bit of a saving. But I'm quite confident 1,350 to 1,400 nickers worth of hardware inside here. Now that means that the early access price point of, again, between 1,600 to about 2,100 is definitely more expensive. So what are you getting for that money? Well, number one, you are getting a pre-built solution. So you're not going to have to spend time connecting stuff. More importantly, you're not going to have to spend time knocking around and working out your bifurcation and trying to separate all the PCIe's appropriately to motherboard and dicking around with the chipset. On top of that, the build time itself is going to take a long time. Now, this device is saying it's going to arrive with 2 years of warranty. So again, 2 years of hardware warranty, quite good. But more importantly, it is delivered pre-built across those different configurations. So again, I'm not going to say I'm defending, I'm not going to say I'm attacking that, but I'm prepared to say that at least at the early access price point, that does make it a quite appealing price for a pre-built solution there. It's OS free, so you're not going to be spending money on an operating system, but some of you might have liked one to be included. But let's talk a little bit about this being a Canadian product. It's been shipped from Canada. Everything from the note that was delivered to that bag of crisps are from Canada. Is this a Canadian NAS? Now, it's probably going to come as a very little surprise to many of you that this is not a wholly and exclusively Canadian-built product there. Indeed, I'm willing to bet some of you, as soon as I said Canadian NAS, already started typing 45 drives below. Let me save you the trouble. This device is constructed in Canada, but the components actually come from China and the USA. Now, I did ask OpnNAS about this. I sent an email to Eric in advance with a bunch of questions of things I encountered when I was taking it apart and looking at it. And one of the earliest questions I had was, is this really a Canadian NAS? There's a lot of the marketing materials do seem to indicate that. Now, they were very upfront, very honest about it in terms of where their supplies come from, where the components come from, and the design. And I asked them to provide me with an answer to the question that I could read here on YouTube as far as their statement is. And it was as follows. Regarding manufacturing and development, we work with 4 suppliers. 3 are in China and 1 is in the USA. However, all assembly, design, testing and warranty services are handled in-house in Toronto, Canada. The D12 case was developed in collaboration with our Chinese partner, requiring 4 iterations to achieve the durability and silent operation we needed. The motherboard development was a significant challenge, requiring 3 months of collaboration with our suppliers, multiple modifications to switches, and over 30 BIOS revisions to ensure proper compatibility with Unraid and TrueNAS. We also optimized IOMMU settings to enable PCIe pass-through functionality. Now, I know there's going to be mixed feelings to that statement. Number one, there's going to be some of you going, well, in that case, why didn't I just buy something like this from China? And again, no one's saying you can't buy a system like this DIY. I think that's a very fair assessment. Most people that go DIY will look at turnkey NAS solutions that I've talked about before and go, why on earth would I buy that? I could just build it myself. And if you've got the knowledge, that's fantastic stuff. I do think the brand could stand to be a little bit more transparent on their pages about the construction. And at the time of me recording this, they've not made their Kickstarter or crowdfunding page live. So therefore, I can't see how much of that information is being displayed to backers. So chances are, I'm saying this in the video and it may well be portrayed very honestly, earnestly and clearly on their pages. But nonetheless, we have to at least acknowledge that if this system has lots of its components coming from China and some of its components coming from America, and again, they didn't detail which parts were coming from where, and it's constructed in Canada, I think it's fair to say that in the start of 2025, with regards to discussions around tariffs, imports and exports, how much that will implement pricing on this structure down the road is going to be debatable.
If
I
they
think
can maintain
right
that
now,
price point,
that price
that's
tag that
great
they've got issued
stuff.
on their
It's only
website, if they
half
can
the
maintain
discussion, but
that
still
price
1600
once
to
this goes to
2100
crowdfunding,
ain't too
and
bad for what you're
users
getting here, at
have-
least in
my opinion. But if the device is coming from Canada, and certainly if components for it are coming from China and the US into Canada, US-based customers
can
are going to be
maintain
wondering
that price
about
point of between
what
1600
price
and
tags in terms of
2100
tax
once this
and those
goes to
good old
crowdfunding,
tariffs
that's a good
are going to
start,
be
'cause I think
impacting
a lot of users
their
are
purchase down the
concerned
road.
about devices
Now,
that have
there's
got
an
key
element of
components
the unknown
inside
when it comes
that
to
are
tariffs right now
exported.
globally if you are based in the US bringing stuff in.
If they
And
can
perhaps these
maintain
aren't
that price
questions
point
that can be answered in a
1600
video
and
being recorded at the end of March 2025 when delivery of this product from the crowdfunding campaign is going to take place many months down the road. Bottom line, I think they need to be a little bit clearer during the crowdfunding launch about how taxes are going to be implemented during distribution and if this is going to go perhaps through a redistribution for US customers or if it's going to be shipped directly from Canada. Again, it's too early to say, and in the second video for this, notwithstanding performance benchmarks, I'm hoping to speak directly with Eric at OpnNAS about his product and finding out more about the methodology and the crowdfunding, and that's all going to be for video 2. But I'm going to wrap things up here because it's already gone on quite long, this video, talking about the hardware and construction, and it's not until I've got a lot more hardware for the surrounding testing on this that I can make any firm final judgment. For now, I like the construction, I think it's impressive what they've shipped, and the general hardware caliber is notable degrees higher than a number of crowdfunding and semi-DIY but yet pre-constructed options in the market right now. But it's going to be about that delivery, and as a crowdfunding product, until we see the proof in the pudding in performance and we see the proof in the pudding of delivery, I'm still going to hold off reservations on this for now, but stay tuned for that second video. If you've got any questions about this or questions you want me to raise with Eric in the open Q&A that I'm hoping to have here on the channel, then do let me know in the comments below. I'll do a few social posts asking for more questions later. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.